Hey everyone, I'm Mariana, this is Impression Blend, and today we are bringing monthly wrap-ups back. You keep asking for them, so here we go. Longtime subscribers already know what these are, but for the newer people, because I haven't done these in about a year and a half, it's been a while. But this is the video where once a month I talk about everything I watched in that month, including any TV series if I have watched any. I don't watch too many of those, but mostly it's just me scrolling through my Letterboxd and telling you about everything I saw. So let's get started. As far as TV series go, like I said, I don't watch too many, and January was no exception. I tried watching The Curse, starting with a hot take right away. Get ready. I am not going to be finishing The Curse. This was so not my thing, and I know people are loving this series, but it just did not work for me. The Curse is a black comedy thriller series starring Nathan Fielder, Benny Safdie, and Emma Stone. Emma Stone is mainly the reason why I tried to watch this, and it explores how an alleged curse disturbs the relationship of a newly married couple as they try to conceive a child while co-starring on their problematic new TV series. Listen, I only got through one episode, so take what I say with a grain of salt, but the problem here was that it was just not my kind of humor. Not only were the characters unlikable, I don't have a problem with unlikable characters. I have plenty of favorite series and movies with unlikable characters, but it was the combination of really unlikable characters, really awkward people acting overly awkward, and this kind of strange humor that sometimes worked, sometimes didn't. It was just not for me, and I kind of expected it to not be for me because I am not a fan of Nathan Fielder's brand of work. I'm not really into his sense of humor. I'm not really into his delivery. The things that he writes tend to be not for me. And I was hoping that Emma Stone and Benny Safdie were going to offset this, but it was just, no, it was not my thing at all. It was too weird. It was too awkward. And yeah, I just couldn't get into it. People I've talked to who have seen this and know my taste have confirmed that this is very unlikely to be my kind of thing. So I gave up after one episode. Honestly, I barely finished even that. So that was a no. I'm not going to be rating it based on one episode, but I could not finish, have no desire to continue. The other series that I have started watching, I'm currently watching it, and I cannot talk about it because it's Constellation. This is a sci-fi psychological thriller series, and the vague premise of it is a woman who has returned to Earth upon a disaster during her mission finds parts of her life seemingly missing. It's starring Noomi Rapace, Jonathan Banks, and it premieres on Apple TV on February 21st, which is why I am under strict embargo. I cannot say anything about it, whether I like it, whether I don't like it, any kind of opinions. I'm sorry. So I'm just letting you know I'm watching it. Be jealous, I guess, because I think a lot of you, just like me, enjoy watching sci-fi. So yeah, I will report back when I'm allowed to, which is soon, but not yet. And with that, we are going to move on to all of the movies I watched. I watched a bunch, so let's take a look at my Letterboxd. In case you don't follow me, this is my page. I am Impression Blend on there as well, and I'm constantly on this website. I am logging stuff, I am rating stuff, I review pretty much every single thing I watch. So let's go all the way to January 1st. I started the month and the year by rewatching Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves, which if you have seen my top 10 movies of 2023 video, if you haven't, check it out. I will link it in the info box below. But if you have seen that, you know it is actually one of my favorite movies of the year. I love this movie. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it because I talk about it in that video, but it is so much fun. If you enjoy fantasy adventure, if you love a good charismatic cast, I mean, who doesn't? If you enjoy having fun with an adventure film, if you miss that fantasy adventure subgenre that seems to be so rare these days and you haven't seen this movie, you need to watch it. It is so much fun, and I'm definitely going to be rewatching it over and over again. This is great. So once again, gave it an 8 out of 10. I do my ratings on a 10-point scale. You already know this, I'm sure, if you've seen any of my reviews or my short reviews, but I know some people find it confusing when I automatically convert the 5-star system from Letterboxd into my 10-point system, but it's just easier for me. I am going to keep saying it in 10-point version, just to let you know. So yes, 8 out of 10 to Dungeons and Dragons. Then things took a turn for the worse. You could say they took a dive, pun intended. I watched Night Swim, and that was pretty horrible. It was so lame. It was so bland. It was not scary. This is a horror movie about a haunted swimming pool, which to me sounds like an amazing premise. It sounds like something that would be a lot of fun to watch. It'll be a little bit ridiculous, a little bit cheesy, but in the best way. Make it a supernatural slasher about a swimming pool. Yes, have fun with it. But did they have fun with it? Absolutely not. I do have a short review of this, so if you've seen this, you know how strongly I felt about this movie being pretty disappointing. And yeah, this is very much a January movie. It is not scary. It's very tropey. Nothing about this is interesting other than the premise. It was such a huge disappointment, which is why it gets a 3 out of 10. The rating is pretty much for the interesting premise and a few cool shots of the pool. That's about it. Next up, I watched Pontypool. Now, Pontypool is a zombie movie that I love to recommend because it is so underrated. And as somebody who finds the zombie subgenre to be pretty boring, you rarely see filmmakers do something interesting with this subgenre. But Pontypool is so interesting the way they approach it. It has a nice snowy setting, which I always appreciate in horror movies. It's about a radio DJ from a Canadian town who is getting snowed in at his radio station, and then a zombie apocalypse unfolds. I will not be telling you the details of how the virus works here, but just trust me that they do something interesting with it, and you should absolutely watch it. One of the most underrated horror movies out there. It does have some pacing issues because it takes a while to get to the point, but once it gets going and once you understand what's going on and how things work, you are going to have so much fun with this one. I guarantee it. So I once again went with a solid 7 out of 10 for this one. This was a rewatch, and mostly it's the pacing that is keeping me from giving it a higher rating because you do have to kind of give it some time and wait for it to get into the truly interesting stuff, but it is very much worth the wait. So once again, highly recommend. Next up, I watched Twister, which is absolutely a classic 90s disaster movie. And believe it or not, I have not seen Twister in its entirety ever until now. And since there's a sequel coming out this year, which I really doubt is going to be good, I do not think they could recapture the magic of what Twister is, even with a charismatic star like Glenn Powell. Still, I don't have a lot of faith in it, but I will be there because Twister was everything I needed it to be. What I was hoping for here is just prime 90s blockbuster cheese, and that is what Twister delivered. It's about storm chasers and tornado hunters, and they're trying to get this innovative device into the heart of a extremely intense tornado to measure what's going on and to be able to predict when a tornado is going to hit earlier than they can at the moment. It is starring Helen Hunt, Bill Paxton, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Alan Ruck, so many familiar faces. If, like me, you enjoy blockbusters, you enjoy 90s cinema, and for some reason you have not seen this movie, it's definitely worth the hype and it's definitely very nostalgic to watch if you remember the 90s. So once again, that was a solid 7 out of 10, and I would definitely watch this again. Then after that, I went on a whole journey watching horror movies, specifically looking for wintry horror movies. The first one is The Last Broadcast, and this is an early found footage film. It's from 1998. This movie is okay. It's basically about this filmmaker who decides to go on his own investigation and look into a double murder that he thinks the wrong person is in jail for. And while that sounds like an interesting and reasonable setup for a found footage movie, this third person perspective just doesn't fully work. The low budget aspect of it all, and it definitely feels very low budget, is actually something that adds authenticity to it. So that was working out, but the third person perspective and where that leads in the third act is it's just off. The movie also tries to go for some commentary on how media shapes the truth that we believe in. And while it does have some merit, it is just very half-baked and underdeveloped. And I don't know if they needed less of it or more of it, but it was just, the movie is interesting in concept and some things about it are interesting, but overall, this is just not it. That's why I went with a 6 out of 10. I would only recommend this to somebody who is really interested in found footage and wants to kind of dig for some lesser known movies in that subgenre. Then I decided to, this was a mistake, I decided to watch Paranormal Activity Next of Kin. Now, I am not a big fan of the Paranormal Activity franchise, but I wanted to watch this because so many people said it feels very different from the rest of the franchise. So I thought maybe this is a good thing. It is not. The premise in a nutshell feels like the filmmakers just watched Midsommar, really liked it, and then they were like, what if we did that, but we did it with the Amish people? And then it's just not very good. That's really the bottom line here. It is still very full of jump scares. It's full of cliches. You know what's going to happen. You know what's coming. Characters are making ridiculous decisions. Did anybody expect it to be great? Not me, but still I expected it to be better than that. The copious amounts of shaky cam in the final act did not help me either. I ended up giving it a 4 out of 10, mainly because for Paranormal Activity as a franchise, this is not the worst thing. And there are some effective scares in there as well, but overall, this is just not very good, not for me. Then I decided to check out Wind Chill, and yes, that is Emily Blunt on the poster. This movie not only has very low viewership, not many people have seen it, but also it has very low ratings. I mean, the average rating on Letterboxd is 2.6, and most of those ratings skew lower, so this is not a good sign. But you know, how am I ever going to find underrated gems if I'm not gonna watch movies that are poorly rated or underwatched? And I actually think this movie is being treated unfairly. I'm not going to lie. And even though it does have some of those ridiculous early 2000s horror elements, I think it mostly works. This is about 2 college students who share a ride home for the holidays, and their car breaks down on the road. There's a blizzard going on, and then just ghosts start happening. And I think that was actually a very effective, simple premise. Once again, I do love some snow set horror, so that might be part of why I enjoyed it so much. I just think the story was interesting, how it all ended and what the final kind of puzzle was really cool. And Emily Blunt is just a joy to watch. She's lovely. So I gave this a 7 out of 10. I think this movie is being treated unfairly. I don't think it is nearly as bad as you might think based on the reviews and the ratings. So I would definitely suggest you check it out if you want to see some early 2000s horror that you might have missed. Next up, I went for a classic. This is The Invisible Man, back from 1933. I am not well versed in Universal monsters, and I am trying to fix that slowly. So let me know in the comments below what your favorite Universal Monsters movies are. I would love some recommendations because there are so many of them. But so far, I actually think The Invisible Man is my favorite Universal Monsters movie that I've seen. It is very creative as far as the visual effects go. I was actually surprised how good the visual effects look for 1933. Of course, you can tell how they're done these days, and you can see some of the trickery as you're watching the movie, but it looks so cool and it is so intense. I mean, this guy who is invisible goes from turning invisible and figuring that out to saying immediately, hey, I'm going to take over the world, and to let people know to take me seriously that I am going to take over the world, I'm just going to kill some people. I mean, sir, you did not mess around. Go big or go home, I guess. But still, that escalated quickly, I must say. A really, really fun horror classic. I genuinely had such a good time with it, really enjoyed it, would highly recommend it if you're trying to dip your toe into horror classics in general. This is absolutely iconic, and I totally understand why. This was a solid 8 out of 10. Next up, things once again took a turn for the worse because I decided to watch The Strangers. Now, I should have known this was not going to be good because I am not a fan of the home invasion subgenre. I don't find it interesting. I don't find it too creative or challenging or thought-provoking or even that scary, to be honest. But you know, a lot of people say that The Strangers is a genuinely scary movie and it's a movie that they really enjoy. So I thought, why not give it a chance, see what it's all about. This was not for me. The biggest surprise here for me and the biggest issue was that it was mostly just boring. I mean, even considering the short runtime, it still felt like not much was happening and it was dragging most of the time. How do you make a movie that's under an hour and a half drag? This is just, honestly, this is kind of an achievement. I don't even have that much to say about it because I just found it deeply uninteresting. There were a couple, I mean, I'm really talking a couple of tense moments, but overall, this was just not for me at all. This is a 4 out of 10. That might even be too high for this movie. Really did not enjoy it. Then I decided to take a quick break from the horror genre and I watched Comet, which I was under the impression was going to be a bit of a sci-fi movie, and I guess you could say that because it's about this couple whose love story unfolds in different universes. It's kind of like exploring what these two people would be like in different situations and whether or not they would end up together. It feels very 500 Days of Summer meets Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. And sometimes it is cute and romantic, and sometimes it is entirely toxic. The writing is just overdoing it. The characters are very frustrating most of the time. So all of that kept me from getting fully emotionally invested in this movie. I enjoyed it to an extent. I didn't think it was terrible, but I did not think it was great. And I thought this kind of premise deserved a better movie, but it was just kind of a light sort of sci-fi, not really, maybe sometimes romantic story. It's directed by the creator of Mr. Robot, which is the main reason I watched this, but it was just not at all what I was hoping it would be, and for what it was, it just didn't deliver. So I did not hate it, but I didn't love it either. It was kind of a meh movie for me, and I'm probably going to forget about it very, very soon. So that's a 6 out of 10. After that, I went back to the horror genre and I decided to check out Cold Prey, which is a slasher that comes up every time you try to find underrated horror gems. This is a movie from Norway, and it's about 5 friends who go snowboarding and they get into some trouble in an abandoned ski lodge. Once again, not a movie I have a ton to say about. It is a very, very average slasher. Yes, the setting is cool and there is some gruesome stuff in it from time to time, but overall, it's just, there's nothing that's special about it. So I'm not really sure where the hidden gem reputation is really coming from. I did not find this impressive at all. This is right in the middle for me at 5 out of 10. Very, very average. Then I watched Significant Other, and this movie I am surprised people are not talking about because this is kind of a slow burn thriller that goes some interesting places. I don't know how much I should tell you about this even because I feel like revealing a part of what this is about is a bit of a spoiler. It just goes places in the second half, and I really appreciated what it did with the story. I was not expecting it to go where it went. It's also a lot funnier than I expected in the second half. The ending is something I'm not 100% sold on, but overall, this was a really good time. I didn't tell you what this was about, did I? Let me tell you. Significant Other is about a couple that go on a romantic backpacking trip through the Pacific Northwest, but something weird starts going on along the way. It seems like it's going to be your typical they're not alone in the woods type of movie, but I promise you it does something a lot more interesting with that. And if you like similar movies to me, you're going to enjoy this. Also, this is starring Micah Monroe, and she does a really good job in this movie. So definitely a recommendation from me, a 7 out of 10, and put this on your watch list. I am really surprised people are not talking about this one. Maybe people just don't know this movie exists, in which case, once again, put it on your watch list. It exists. After that, I rewatched Red Rooms, which is a movie I highly recommend to everybody who enjoys a good twisted thriller. I have a review of it on my channel, which a lot of you have not watched. You should check it out. It's a good review for a really good movie, and you should watch the movie as well. You do need to use a VPN for it if you're in the US. It is on VOD in some countries. It is out on Blu-ray in some countries. Some places it's in limited release. It's kind of a messy release for this movie. It is not out in US officially yet. I don't know when it's going to be out, but you guys are all on the internet. You know what a VPN is. Use a VPN. Watch it this way. It's not illegal. Don't pirate this movie, but just watch it through Canada. You know what I mean? But yeah, Red Rooms is excellent. 9 out of 10 for this one. This was the highest rating I gave this month, and this is currently my favorite movie of the year. We're not very far into the year, so that's not saying much, but I think it's going to stick around for a while as one of my favorites because this is absolutely the horror thriller to beat this year. After that, I watched the 3-part documentary on Netflix, American Nightmare, about the woman who was kidnapped, disappeared. The police thought this was a Gone Girl situation. She came back, everything was confusing. The police thought that the main thing that they should do is investigate the woman and her boyfriend and not actually investigate what happened to her. It's a very frustrating watch, but it's a really good documentary, and it drives you insane by how incompetent the law enforcement was and how they treated these people. I mean, this is ridiculous. I highly recommend it. It was really good. I don't want to tell you more about it because I don't want to spoil the story, or you might already know the story because it was on the news. I missed it. I did not know where it was going, so this was all new to me. But yeah, check it out. It's on Netflix. Gave it an 8 out of 10. After that, I decided to continue with the documentary thing, and I watched The Imposter, which is an absolutely insane story. It's about a disappearance of a 13-year-old boy who just vanished without a trace from his home in Texas, and 3.5 years later, they found supposedly this boy in a village in Spain with a terrifying story of kidnapping and torture, and his family is very excited to take him home. But as you can imagine, things are not what they seem, and this is an absolutely insane story. I cannot stress that enough. It honestly just left me kind of confused because it's the type of story that you watch and you just wonder, how is this possibly real? It was just hard for me to imagine how this possibly unfolded the way it did. So I'm still questioning it. And if this was a movie, if it was just a fictional film, people would think it is too ridiculous and would never happen this way. But here we are. Apparently that's what occurred. If you have not seen this documentary, then check it out if you want a truly insane story that makes you question, what are people even thinking these days? I mean, what in the world? What in the world is my main reaction to this? I ended up giving it a 7 out of 10. Now, next up, I watched a movie nobody knows about. It's called Innocent Sunday, and this is a movie set right after the Chernobyl disaster. It's basically about this guy and his friends who are just wandering around and not accepting that their small scale apocalypse has happened and they're not getting out of town. They're like doing gigs and singing and drinking and hanging out. And that's just the movie. And it's not good at all. As you can see, I gave it a 2 out of 10, 1 out of 5 in this case. It's bad. The shaky cam is bad. The acting is bad. The dialogue is bad. Nobody acts like a real person. It's weird how bad this movie is. It's shocking. So yeah, just don't even bother with this one. Skip it. Pretend it doesn't exist. There's a reason it's as obscure as it is. Next up, I watched The Ruins, which is a movie that really surprised me. I was not sure if I was going to like this one or not, but I ended up really, really liking it. It's about a group of American students who are on vacation in Mexico, and they decide to go visit an archaeological dig in the jungle that is obscure and away from other touristy attractions. This is why I would never do such a thing on vacation, and I will survive, thank you. I do not go to obscure locations nobody has heard of because that sounds sketch. This is a really cool take on the whole killer plant subgenre. They don't make a lot of those movies in general, but this one in particular was really entertaining, really gory and nasty. That is part of why I gave it a 7 out of 10 and not higher. It was actually a little bit too much for me. There were things that I did not need to see. And also part of the reason for the rating is that these characters make some choices that, man, should not be made. It was a really good and really effective horror film though, and what they do with the concept is very interesting. I do have to tell you, there are 2 different endings. You can find them both online. Definitely check out all of the endings that are available because it really changes the feel of the movie at the end. But yeah, 7 out of 10 for The Ruins. And then I decided to watch The Strangers Pray at Night. I don't know why I did that to myself. I mean, there was a really low chance that I was gonna like this at all, but I did see some of you told me that the second movie is better and more interesting and not boring, and you guys lied to me because this was absolutely awful. I already did not like The Strangers, but Strangers Pray at Night was even worse. I gave it a 2 out of 10. As you can tell, I will not be continuing with the franchise because yes, there are 3 sequels coming out this year. There's a trilogy of these Strangers movies and I want to know why they're coming out because who needs them? Who asked for them? How many fans of The Strangers are there out there? Identify yourself in the comments because like I am just mind blown that these movies exist and that they're making 3 more and releasing them all in 1 year. Just why? Why? Same issues as before. It drags, it's not scary, there's barely any story, it's a very basic home invasion, the characters are lame and uninteresting, the horror is just non-existent, there's like 1 good scene in there and that is it. Not even a scene, there's like 1 good sequence of shots, not a full scene, just a sequence of shots. And that is it. I do not understand the appeal of this, hence the 2 out of 10, 1 out of 5. Never watching another Strangers movie again. Then I watched Code 8, which is a sci-fi heist movie that is on Netflix starring Stephen Amell and Robbie Amell. And I enjoyed this. I know I didn't give this a very high rating. I gave it a 6 out of 10. I was actually tempted to give it a 7 out of 10 because as somebody who loves sci-fi, this was just the kind of popcorn movie that I wanted in my life. It's set in the future where random people have powers and they are somehow being oppressed. I mean, I don't know how they got to this point. I wish this movie told me more about it because how do you oppress people with superpowers? They have superpowers. They can fuck you up. What does this mean? Why are they allowing this to? Anyway, let's not get into it. So these people have superpowers and some of them have resorted to crime and some of them are like, no, we need to take our power back that somehow got taken away. So Stephen Amell's character is running this group of criminals that, of course, owe things to the bigger crime lord and all of that. Robbie Amell has a sick mom that he doesn't have money to pay for an operation for, so he decides to join the gang and try to get some money. It's a heist movie, but sci-fi. It's fun. I liked it. This might actually be a 7 out of 10. I'm gonna leave it at a 6 out of 10, but you know, the more I think about it, the more I want to rate it a little bit higher. After that, I watched Ruby Sparks, which is kind of a rom-com, kind of a fantasy movie. It's about a young novelist who was successful earlier in his life, and now he has writer's block and he can't write. So he starts writing this girl that he's seeing in his dreams. And one day she just appears in his apartment, house, his place where he lives. I forget what it is. It's really cute. What can I say? It's a cute premise. It takes a little bit of its time to get to what it's trying to do. Until then, you kind of think this is your basic manic pixie dream girl situation, but it is a lot more interesting than that. And Zoe Kazan, who is starring in this movie, along with Paul Dano, who I love, she wrote this movie and she definitely knew what she was doing. So I would highly recommend this. This was very charming, very cute, kind of light, but the premise is unique and it actually comments on how we can't control how other people act and who they are, and the images we conjure up in our mind about other people are just not reality. It's great. I would definitely give it a watch. This was a 7 out of 10. Very much enjoyed it. After that, I decided to give Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny a try. And this was the longest movie I've seen in a while. It's not even that long, but it feels like it. Honestly, I'm going to say something that's going to be a little bit controversial, maybe a lot controversial, but I would rather watch The Kingdom of the Crystal Skull again than watch The Dial of Destiny, because at least The Kingdom of the Crystal Skull fails gloriously. I mean, some of it is actually genuinely fun. I think it's getting a little bit too harsh of a criticism. It's not the worst movie that ever existed. Some of it is shockingly awful. This is just boring. The Dial of Destiny is so just bland. It's exactly what you expect, but in a bad way, in a way where you're just uninterested and not invested. Maybe other people liked it more than I did. I could not wait for this movie to end, if I'm being honest. I'm not even going to tell you the premise because it's an Indiana Jones movie. You know what happens, okay? If you have seen an Indiana Jones movie, you know what this movie is, and I do not recommend. Just leave it after the third one is my suggestion. If you want to watch more, watch the fourth one, just laugh at it because it's ridiculous. This is so unnecessary. This is a 4 out of 10 for, once again, a few good ideas, a few good scenes, but overall, a huge disappointment. I don't know why they made this. Please stop it. Then I went back to my horror explorations and I finally watched Silent Hill. I have not seen it until now, and it was really extremely foggy in the Chicago area. It looked like Silent Hill out in the world for like 3 days straight, so this felt very appropriate. I don't know how to feel about this movie, if I'm being honest, because the story is ridiculous. The characters are just paper thin, and the things that they do make no sense. The dialogue is not good at all. However, I gave this a positive rating because the tone of it and the atmosphere and the monsters are so awesome. So many fun monsters. I'm sure you guys have seen this movie and you know what I'm talking about. So as far as like watching a crazy horror movie with really fun and disturbing visuals, this hits the spot and it has its charm. I understand why it has a following. Gave it a 6 out of 10. Once again, I don't have much to say about it because on the front of storytelling characters, this is pretty bad, but the visuals and the monsters are where it's at, and I appreciated that. It's nice to sometimes put something like that on. This is a perfect background horror movie. You don't really need to pay attention to it. You turn around, there's a new monster, and it's doing crazy stuff like skinning people. I mean, what? Yep, 6 out of 10 for Silent Hill. Then I watched one of the Oscar nominated documentaries that I haven't watched yet, and that is The Eternal Memory. It's about an older couple. One of them has Alzheimer's, and it's incredibly heartbreaking, but it's also this really genuine display of love and care. It's depressing. It's a very depressing documentary. I don't think as a documentary, as a film, it explored its themes at all, how memory shapes us and what collective memory is to all of us. And it just doesn't go into any of that, and it had so many chances to do that. But I also don't want to seem like I'm judging this heartbreaking real story. And there are very genuine, heartfelt moments in it and very powerful moments. It's the kind of film where if it doesn't get you emotional, are you even, breathing? Is your heart beating? What's going on? So I gave it a 6 out of 10 because I was trying to be objective about it and view it from the perspective of filmmaking and documentary filmmaking, but I'm not rating the story. Of course, the story is brutal in its own way and very heartfelt. Then I decided to watch another horror movie, and that was Overlord. This was a disappointment for me. As you can tell, I gave it a 5 out of 10. It is just honestly not my kind of movie. It's not my kind of horror. I rarely like action horror. This is about Nazi zombies, or rather zombies as a result of Nazi experiments during World War II, which sounds like a fun premise. And the third act definitely goes all out if you want to see some crazy zombie action in a historical setting. Absolutely. I think you're going to enjoy it. But overall, you have to sit through so much terrible dialogue and questionable acting until you get there. And when you get there, it's just a lot of action and gore. So this was not for me. Hence the 5 out of 10. It was just, it's not my thing. I wish I liked it more, and maybe my expectations were too high because a lot of people talk highly about it and talk about it as this underrated gem. Once again, looking for underrated gems. Not it, not my style of horror, but I can see why it can be appealing to some people. What I did really enjoy is the next movie I watched, which was Color Out of Space. This is a Nicolas Cage movie that is cosmic Lovecraftian horror, and this was 100% my vibe. The way I described it in my review is that this is for fans of Annihilation, but Nick Cage style with a lot more neon. And if you've seen Annihilation, you know exactly what I mean. The official premise is that the meteorite crashes into this family's front yard, melts into the earth, and infects both the land and the properties of space-time with a strange otherworldly color, which I guess is very accurate, but it is essentially very, very beautifully looking sci-fi horror. And if you love that kind of slow burn, weird cosmic horror, this is 100% going to be for you. It's definitely weird, and I understand why it's too weird for some people. It's trippy. It's the kind of movie where you watch and you're just wondering, what in the world are you even watching? But it was 100% for me. I will say Nicolas Cage goes a little bit too crazy Nick Cage in this. I enjoy crazy Nick Cage just as much as anybody else, but I think he goes too far. There are some scenes where you want him to like take it down a little bit because he's on a different level than the rest of the cast. They do not match his intensity, and I don't think it's their fault. I think it's his fault because they are where the movie needs them to be. He is, at an 11 because he's Nick Cage. But like I said, really, really enjoyed it. I think it is unforgettable visually, tonally. The score is beautiful. I wish they made more movies like this, but I understand that this is a little bit too weird for people and not the most easily marketable film, or not the most easily enjoyed film for most people. But yeah, this was for me. And finally, the last thing I watched this month was Nimona, which I actually was surprised by how much I enjoyed Nimona. This has a lovely sci-fi fantasy setting that has knights and queens and heroes and all of that, but it's also futuristic and definitely sci-fi, and this is the kind of blend of things that I really enjoy. They don't do this very often, but I'm glad they did that here, and it's used very well here. It's about a knight and his sidekick, and it's a coming of age story as well. It's a story about learning who you are and learning how to deal with the world. It's a nice story. I understand why people might find it predictable or not outstanding enough, but I thought it was really nice. Plus, the style of animation was really enjoyable as well. And it had some genuinely funny as well as some genuinely heartfelt moments. This was a win in my book. I enjoyed this a lot. 7 out of 10. If it was a little bit more original with its story, if it was less predictable, this would easily be one of my favorite movies of the year, but they didn't quite get there. Still, even as somebody who does not watch a lot of animation, I recommend it. This is a good one. And that is it for my January wrap up. Let me know in the comments what you have been watching this past month and what are some of the favorite things that you've seen. I hope you're having a wonderful day. And if you want to see more of my videos and more of my recommendations, you should check out one of these videos next.